So I'm Heather Stelter. I'm studying environmental sustainability through the Department of Geography and Environmental Sustainability here at OU, and my research focuses on textile waste. Textile waste is not just what happens when we process clothing and when we throw clothing away, but it's every part of the cycle when we go from agricultural growth, labor inputs, selling, transport, the packaging that clothing comes in, and the disposal, so what we do with it when we're finally ready to get rid of what we don't wear anymore. The average person buys about 68 garments a year, which when you think about how much clothing that is, it's more than can fit in an average closet. So what's happening to the clothing in the meantime is what we're trying to study. We're trying to figure out where it's going, how we're getting rid of it, are we donating it, are we burning it, are we throwing it in landfill, and we're looking at ways to reduce consumption for the average consumer. The trick with anything in sustainability is that everything connects. Whenever you approach waste in any form, you have to remember that waste comes from all places. So with textiles, it's really easy to classify it in just thinking about how we throw clothing away. But it's a much bigger picture than that. I mean, we need to think about how the cotton that we use is being grown, how the water that we use to dye the fabrics is being wasted, whether or not we're paying people a living wage for any part of production, whether or not we're using slave labor in the fields to pick cotton. Are we paying our sales reps a decent wage to be selling us the clothing that we have? And how much are we actually spending, and what is that contributing to our global economy? It affects every part of our life. It's the 1st to the 10th top employer in the world, and when you look at the global scales of how involved it is, that's easy to understand. And we need to be looking at it on that scale. It's not something that should just be dismissed as clothing. We wouldn't dismiss a bank because it's just money, because everybody uses money. It's the same thing with clothing. We also are at an interesting crossroads of trying to figure out how we merge modern needs and returning value and care to the clothes we wear. I really look at how do we create consumer awareness and consumer buy-in in textile waste. So one of my suggestions that will be in my thesis is I'm suggesting that we add a line at the bottom of clothing tags that tells you how many washes the garment is expected to last. So the idea behind that is when you go to a store and you're looking at what new sweater you want to buy, if you look at a sweater that's $20 and you see it will only last for 150 washes, or you see a sweater that's $80 but it'll last you for 800 washes, it gives you the ability to make the choice on whether or not you want to invest in something that will last more washes or less, and really let you know where the value for your money is. Within the fashion world, we have gotten to the point that we have fast fashion. That's really where most of textile waste comes from, is clothing that's disposable and made to be thrown out with the new trend. And when you look at retail stores, you're seeing them push out new clothing every 2 to 3 weeks, which when you think about that on a global scale, they're releasing full lines everywhere in the world every 2 to 3 weeks, which there's no need for that kind of clothing. So the average consumer can reduce their clothing waste by reducing how much new clothing they're buying, so using secondhand options, really checking and making sure you don't have an item in your closet that would work for the event, not being afraid to wear things twice. I think that's a pretty big thing we see in our culture, is with the Instagram culture, with the photograph culture. Nobody wants to be photographed in the same thing twice, but when you think about how much clothing that causes you to consume, that really just ups the amount of textile waste we see. I've always loved fashion. I have an inkling for design. I love to sew, I love to create. My undergrad was actually a double major in American history and African textile history, and I took that to go and work within a museum after I initially graduated. I worked to curate a small textile collection. We were putting on an exhibit with clothing from the last 100 years within the county I was working in, and one day we had this little girl come in, and she was looking at all the dresses, and we had them progressed over the eras, and she came up to one of the curators and she asked us why we have all this clothing that's this old if she has to get a new t-shirt every 6 months. It's something that really just makes you sit and think and go, why do we need that much? So that's why I started in sustainability and fashion, and I think also because it is something that touches everyone and it impacts every person I know wears clothing every day.